Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth. California has a $300 billion state budget, and out of that colossal amount of cash, they've allocated a mere $12 million, allegedly, to be set aside for what they're claiming is reparations. $12 million out of $300 billion. That means only 0.004% of the budget. That's not even 1/10 of 1%, so California has allocated exactly nothing to reparations. That's what all the headlines should say, but they don't. The white media opposes any form of racial justice, so of course they devote headlines to it, claiming as if something big has happened, when in reality, it's all about burying the issue. Now, of course, this comes as no surprise to anyone unless you're brand new to the black media. I've personally been telling you for many years now that this is precisely the kind of scam that the white government would try when it came time to actually press them about the money. They would try to do all of these little half measures and little scams and schemes so that they could try to claim, oh, we did something, when it was nothing more than a PR gesture. That's what they would do, an empty, nothing PR gesture, and just call it reparations and try to see if they could get away with it. And the white media would do their part. As the propaganda arm of white supremacy, they would trumpet these do-nothing gestures as finally we can close this tragic chapter of American history. And they would all attempt to declare that reparations has finally been paid, it's no longer a political issue, and black people can't make any demands about it anymore. That's what this is about, burying the issue, if we let them. So California, they say, isn't clear on the path to take with reparations. Give me a break. They know exactly what course they want to take. And that is to hem and haw and send out bootlicks to claim that an apology or a voucher to an HBCU should be considered reparations. But even if they don't do that much, long as the local NAACP office in San Francisco gets a little bit of money, that's reparations. And this so-called reparations that's supposed to be 0.0004% of California's budget, it's not going to be direct cash payments, which means that even if it was supposed to be going to black people, it wouldn't be reparations. Now understand that since the days of the $5 Indians, white supremacists have structured government programs for non-whites in such a way as to either include white people, such as $5 Indians, or in the case of affirmative action, they declare that white women, fully 50% of the white population, are to be considered minorities. And if black people are supposed to be part of this program, well, you got to include white women too. And not surprisingly, white women are the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action. I told you months ago about the so-called Minority Business Development Association and Hispanics, who are a smaller part of the population than black people, yet comprise a larger amount of the people who are beneficiaries of that department also. Now, the problem for white supremacists in this case is they can't pull that kind of bait-and-switch con game with reparations, so instead they're trying to set up scams where they pinpoint industries and businesses where whites have total control, and then they claim we're going to have reparations be basically an auxiliary of those things. It's going to be housing vouchers. Yeah, that way some white real estate interests or developers, they're going to be getting that money. And it won't even be enough to actually buy a house. It won't even be enough for a down payment. But that's the whole point. The white government in California will set up non-cash money transfers. That's what this actually is. It's going to be handed off to their white business pals. And then they'll lie through their teeth and say that it has something to do with black people, knowing the whole time they're lying and checking to see if we're buying it or not. And this is what's going on in liberal California. Oh, California is so liberal. Yeah, they're so liberal that they're acting just like Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, or any other red state toilet you can name. They want to establish a reparations scam that they hope other states will copy in their efforts to get out of paying what they owe. Nothing happens in a vacuum under white supremacy. These guys are all operating out of the same playbook, and they're all taking notes from each other because they put their little pinheads together when they come up with this stuff. They lost the fight to redefine reparations, put a false, phony definition on it. They weren't able to make it where reparations applies to everyone, so now they're just trying to pull the old, I'm white and I say so. They failed to define black immigrants as qualifying for reparations, which also means that they can't slither in later and try to retroactively shoehorn all these other groups into the mix, because that's what the goal was supposed to be. Take all of these other groups, many of whom have been neck deep in practicing anti-black racism, including violence and murders, I've detailed that for you here on this channel, and then go ahead and reward them for it. That's what the goal is, maintaining anti-black solidarity. And as I and others have documented for you, you have these civil rights fossils like the NAACP who are helping them to do this. So when they declare that an apology is reparations, thank you, Jonathan, putting on your cape heart, you'll have all of these decrepit old traitors standing there cheesing, so happy to get a pat on the head from massa, and they'll be saying, this is what our ancestors needed, an apology. This is what we need to bring on some healing. It'll be political theater, but the issue won't be closed unless we accept it, and we won't. Now understand something, this is Governor Gavin Newsom, who is the main one who's the face of this scam. This is the guy who thinks that he's going to be next in line for the presidency. And this is how he intends to get it. And this is the purest evidence of the fact that there's not a dime's bit of difference between either of the major parties where black people are concerned. Newsom is going to do exactly what Mike Bloomberg did 4 years ago when he had a bunch of sellout black mayors standing with him, like then Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner, standing behind him like good little dogs, and saying, "We blacks for Bloomberg." And Gavin Newsom, he's going to try a variation on the same theme. He's going to do a West Coast version of the same scam. By the way, Mike Bloomberg, also a Democrat, and just like Newsom, racist as hell. Don't be surprised when Gavin Newsom holds some sort of press conference or some sort of PR event or some sort of rally, and he's going to have Karen Bass and low-down Willie Brown and even Kamala Harris standing with him, and all of them lecturing us with phony made-up fairy tales about all the things that Gavin Newsom allegedly did for black folks when he was, say, mayor of San Francisco. When he presided over the wholesale ethnic cleansing of San Francisco, that's what happened when he was mayor. The black population plummeted when he was in office, and while this decline didn't begin with the Newsom administration, he did absolutely nothing to stop it or even to slow it down. And as California's governor, he's only accelerated this trend, only now he's done it throughout the entire state. When the Bruce's Beach issue came up last year, Gavin Newsom wanted to make sure that he was the first one in front of those cameras. He wanted that photo op. But it was the black media who warned you to keep watching to see how things develop afterwards, to see if the Bruce's Beach heirs are actually able to keep their land, or whether or not the fix was in from the beginning to force them to sell it the instant they got it. It turned out to be the latter, of course. For those of you who are unfamiliar, which means you get your news from the white media or morning DJs, while Bruce's Beach was being illegally held by California, the white landowners in that area were allowed to develop the land that they owned. Afterwards, though, the zoning board put restrictions in place prohibiting any sort of future development. So when the heirs of Bruce's Beach finally got the land back, they had no way to develop it. They had no way to get it to make money for them, which is the entire point of owning real estate. That's the reason that they were forced to sell, because they couldn't pay the property taxes, which is another reason why land has to be developed, so that it can pay for itself. Now we're going to see some white real estate interests who are going to be coming along, and they're going to get that land, and then we'll see some sort of grandfather clause get invoked. Or, because this is California we're talking about, there'll be some sort of sleazy backroom deal made with the zoning board where these white owners of that land are going to be allowed to develop it. They'll make an exception for them because they always do for white privilege. And then we'll have people telling us that there's no racial discrimination and nobody's holding black people back and white people don't get special treatment and black people are not being singled out. That's what we'll get, rinse and repeat on that one. This is the reason why we cannot be listening to all of these olders. All of the John Lewis, we gonna get in some good trouble. Yeah, but good trouble never took the form of taking on these racists on the white left. Finger wagging at the white right is easy because those guys are cartoonishly racist. But you can't claim that you're actually fighting anti-black racism unless you fight it from all corners. And the white right could not possibly carry out their anti-black agenda if the so-called white left was fighting them. See, that's the lesson to be learned from Reconstruction. During Reconstruction, the federal government actually put force of arms in the southern states. That's the reason why you had the black sheriffs. That's the reason why you had black congresspeople and such, because the federal government made it a point that they were going to be putting teeth behind the policies of stopping any sort of anti-black racism from taking place. That's how you knew that they were serious. And that's the reason why total and complete white solidarity when it comes to anti-black racism is a requisite. It has to be there. If you don't have a critical mass of folks on board, which means a majority of people of both political ideologies, then it simply can't work. There's not enough solidarity in order to maintain the consistency of policy required to keep black people in check. So that's the problem. You could not have the white right doing all this mess without the white left letting them do it. But it doesn't help that the people who white power propped up to pretend to be our leaders, these guys get out there every chance they get to run interference for the enemy. And this is why the generational betrayal of the black baby boomers cannot be condoned and cannot be overlooked and cannot be excused. And yeah, I know there's a few black baby boomers among my listeners who bristle whenever I point that out. If you need for me to go ahead and every single time point out that it's not 100%, then you may be on the wrong YouTube channel, just saying. When the only feather you got in your cap is that you gleefully let some racist kick your behind back in the day, that makes you a coward or a fool or both. The younger generations have rejected this kind of cowardice, and they're not going to sacrifice their dignity, their safety, or their comfort in some half-brained attempt to shame the white supremacists into civilized behavior. We understand an anti-black racist cannot be reformed. They cannot be shamed either because they have no conscience. They can only be punished. And that's the only thing that's ever worked. When these civil rights fossils collaborate against us, that's not some victimless crime. Because the only way that a nigga Jim Clyburn is allowed to even be in Congress is for him to sign off on anti-black legislation and to attack the black community for standing up for ourselves. The only way that a Hakeem Jeffries gets into Congress, much less is made minority leader, is if he works to reinforce anti-black racism, to pass and praise laws that undermine us, to enshrine white privilege into law, and then lie and claim that he had nothing to do with it. It is impossible to have any sort of justice unless the resources in the society are justly distributed. Right now it's a rigged game. It's a game of economic keep-away to make sure that black people are completely and thoroughly locked out, not merely by law, but just a matter of because we said so. No law necessary. We saw that with the survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre. The law was on their side. But the problem is, as long as the white supremacists happen to have force of arms to make it where any sort of asinine ruling that they hand down can't be fought against, at least not physically, we cannot have justice. The CBC, the Congressional Black Talkers, I should say, they should be the main ones coming out against this reparations scam in California. They stood together after a gay nightclub was shot up. They did a sit-in on the floor of the House of Representatives in response to that. Now, after the Mother Emanuel Church massacre, they didn't do anything like that. Same with the Flint water poisoning atrocity. The Congressional Black Talkers have not lifted a finger to stand up for black people, and that's because their job is to whitewash all these legislative anti-black policies. They won't be calling anything genocide here, or declaring that they'll make things come to a halt unless and until black people get what we're owed. Like it or not, and there's practically nothing to like about them, the Klansmen in the so-called House Freedom Caucus, at least they use their position to bring things to a halt and raise hell until they get their way. They actually stand up for their constituency. There's far less of those morons than there are the Congressional Black Talkers, yet one of them has gotten things done and the other one just stands in front of the cameras and prattles on about democracy and other irrelevant terms that mean nothing in America. When you have some CBC bootlick in front of the cameras, they talk no differently than any white member of Congress. They chatter about abortion, immigration, inflation, and they make it a point to avoid saying anything about black people. They go out of their way to avoid mentioning us, except when they want to say that there's some sort of voter suppression going on. Then all of a sudden, they suddenly remember that black people exist. By the way, have you noticed that this year, they're not really trying to push that lie because they know it won't work? The white media articles talking about why black people are saying they ain't going to be voting for Biden, they don't talk about voter suppression, and that's because their lie has been debunked. Sure, they can occasionally try to re-invoke it, but nobody's buying it, and nobody's listening to that line either. This is why I keep bringing those articles up, to point out that the white media realizes their propaganda isn't working, so what they do is they try to talk around it. They go ahead and find some safe, bought and paid for Negroes, usually these people who are part of some Democrat-funded or Democrat-affiliated interest, and they put those guys in the article and say, why, we talked to one of these bought and paid for Democrat shills. Some black person in the community who clearly is not affiliated with the Democrats at all. They're completely objective. And they say that the big interest black people are concerned about happens to be gay marriage, transgender bathrooms, inflation, immigration. That's what they do. That's why I keep pointing out, whenever you look at these folks, you see it, they're part of these organizations. They're not picking people off the street. They're cherry-picking individuals who are going to reinforce the narrative. All the empty rhetoric we get from white liberals, this is why the white media is trying to do a Jedi mind trick on us. And they're trying to use some soft-headed Negroes to do it. This is how Gavin Newsom intends to make his bones with the DNC, to show that he's got the right stuff to be president, because he's going to hold the line against black America, and he'll be as shameless as any Republican about it. He'll do just like Biden, just like Obama, Clinton, and all the rest of them. He'll lie and lie big. And he'll go ahead and say, oh, we're dealing with reparations. See, I'm holding the line for white supremacy. He knows what his job really is. Now, we can be disgusted with all this, but you can't be surprised. We knew that this is what they would try, folks. This is not a surprise at all. Anyone claiming that, see, reparations ain't gonna happen, get the heck out of here with that stupidity. We know that the bad guys are not going to roll over on the first try. They never do. We've been saying this for years. This is going to be a process, not an event. This is a battle of wills, and this is what a battle of wills looks like. You can tell when white power is being made to do something that requires them to give up their power, because that's when they get violent. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but when you see your white liberal friends start to get in your face and they start getting angry, that's when you know, okay, we're getting closer to the goal on this one, because that's what they're going to be doing. The fiercest opposition is not going to be coming from the white right necessarily. It's going to be coming from white liberals who are going to be the ones who show their true colors and let the masks slip. When they see the reparations, cash reparations that we're owed, is actually closer to becoming a reality, when that happens, they're going to be the ones getting in your face and saying, well, you know, my people came here from Ireland or Italy, or they were part of some Jewish pogrom in Russia, and they didn't demand reparations for the potato famine or for the Russian pogroms or what have you. That's what they're going to be saying. And then they're going to be finger wagging and demanding to know, well, what are you going to do with that money, buddy? I mean, I want to know what you're going to be spending it on. You need to explain this to me. And let's be bluntly honest, a lot of you, including a lot of you who listen to me, that kind of thing intimidates you. It bothers you. It worries you. You're concerned about it. You're scared of that outcome. You want to make sure that the people who are already comfortable remain comfortable. Meanwhile, your condition remains as excruciating as ever. Nobody ever concerns themselves with whether or not black people approve of them getting anything, even though we're the most deserving and we're the ones who are also the most unserved. And yet everybody else gets exactly what they want. Nobody says, well, you know what? Black people are the ones who are the majority of hate crimes victims. What is this about an anti-Semitic hate crime law or an anti-Asian hate crime law? Shouldn't we be dealing with the ones against black people because they're the ones who are the primary victims of all of these hate crimes? Nobody said that. We were out of sight, out of mind. Nobody was concerned about black people coming to them and saying, wait a minute here, how can we keep getting passed over when we're the majority of hate crimes victims? Nobody was bothered by that at all, not a pang of remorse. Their consciences were not pricked in the slightest. And when it comes to money, whether it be reparations for Japanese Americans or for Red Indians or what have you, nobody ever says, well, if anybody's deserving of reparations, it's black people. They never mention us at all. And that being the case, as black people, fine then. We can all do that. They're sticking up for themselves alone. We will stick up for ourselves alone and let it be. So no, we're not going for the Jedi mind trick. The white media can post as many phony articles and headlines that they want claiming that, oh, California has passed a reparations law. They can do that all they want. We didn't let them redefine reparations, and we will not let them lie and claim that reparations has been paid, not in form or in quantity. This is the fight of our time. And this fight isn't over just because they say so. This fight only ends when we win. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Dean Ballantyne, Wesley Monroe, Dondi Waddell, Sakina Collins, and Gregory Franklin. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.